Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Rich. We are live. As always, thank you to everybody that's going to watch the show today and everybody that's going to watch the show in the replay. And while we have folks jumping on this morning, we have a very incredibly special guest this morning, Mr. Alan Kelly. Alan is a retired Virginia State Trooper, and we're going to let him introduce himself in just a moment. But first, as always, let me get set up here. I just got the notification that I'm live. That's pretty neat. Let's see here. Once we get set up, we will be ready to rock and roll. Okay, let's see. That's it. Have 7 people join us so far. Please like and share. Hit the share button before we get going today. We got a great guest. Alan Kelly is joining us this morning behind the lines in occupied Virginia. And I'm sure Alan will tell us more about that here in just a little bit. Robert says good morning. Rudy says good morning. Dan Mueller from Flowery Branch, Georgia says, hey. So thank you to everybody joining us this morning. Will is on. Good morning, Will. Please hit that share button. You're going to definitely want to check out today's show. And if you're unfamiliar with the face in front of you this morning, my name is Rich Brown. I'm the co-host and co-founder of the American Warrior Show, America's leading self-defense podcast. We have a website, AmericanWarriorSociety.com, where we have all the training material for your self-defense needs. We also have swag. This morning, I'm drinking out of my American Warrior Society coffee cup. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. On the back, it's got, this is the pink suspenders edition, which is kind of weird. Mike and I were, if you want to listen more about that, Mike and I were bouncers at a nightclub a long time ago, spent several years as bouncers together. And one club, they made us wear these silly pink suspenders. It's the weirdest thing in the world. But anyway, if you want to learn more about your old pal, Rich Brown, I'm a retired Marine Corps officer, former police officer, corrections officer, etc. And if you want to find out more about that, you can check out my bio on AmericanWarriorSociety.com. We got 19 people joining us. Please hit the share button this morning. Brent is on. Gerald is on out there in Oregon, coin number 952. If you want to know what a coin number is, you're going to have to check out American Warrior Society to find out more. Linda is on from Fort Worth. Raz McDonald, Dr. John Adine. Good morning, Dr. Adine. And without much further ado, Alan, good morning, sir. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Rich, for having me.
Yeah, I don't think we say this enough. The guests that we are very fortunate enough to have on the show have all but I think one been are members of the American Warrior Society. And we don't tout that enough. So people constantly go, my God, how do you get such amazing guests? I'm like, they're members of this group that I'm just humbled and excited to be a part of. So thank you again, sir, for being among us. I got some questions for you, Alan. And I guess the first thing that we probably ought to get out of the way is tell the audience a little bit more about yourself.
Yes, Rich, I'm a good old born and raised Virginia country boy here in Southwest Virginia, born in the little town of Abingdon, which is right next to the Bristol, Tennessee line. Grew up here in Abingdon, went to high school here, got an interest in law enforcement and emergency medical services while I was a teenager, working as a volunteer for the Washington County, Virginia Life-Saving Crew. I got to be involved with law enforcement quite a bit, and I realized that that was the career direction that I was going to go. First chance I got into any type of law enforcement was way back in the mid 70s. I was hired by the Virginia Department of Transportation to do commercial motor vehicle weight enforcement. We had a trooper with us that would do that, but we had to go in as far as, working the scales, testifying in court, etc. And we were part of that team. I was fortunate enough to be hired by the Washington County Sheriff's Department in 1979. And that was a real eye opener. Back then, we had no FTO program. In fact, the day that I was hired, the sheriff threw me the keys to a cruiser and said, go to work. No academy, it was 3 months before I even went to any type of police academy. And got into that, was fortunate enough to survive that and got my foothold in a career where, I knew that was exactly what I wanted to do. There was no doubt about it. Fortunately, in 1985, I was hired by the Virginia State Police. And by, and I'm kind of what you may say, a little prejudice on that end of it. The Virginia State Police by far has one of the best training programs in the United States, as far as I'm concerned. They were one of the first state police organizations that became accredited and showing what they're, that they are a organization that has, is progressive and has, law enforcement truly at their core. When I first got out of the academy, our academy at that time was 21 weeks. The academy now is 35 weeks, so it's very extensive. I got stationed up in Rockbridge County, Virginia, which is in the upper end of the Roanoke Valley, lower end of the Shenandoah Valley. People don't, Rockbridge County is where Lexington, Virginia is, where you have W&L University. I may have to correct that. It's going to be Washington University now, not Washington Lee University, and VMI is located there. So I had to deal with multicultures up in that area. We're a very rural county, like the county that was born and raised at, and where I eventually got back here. And you had to deal with the college crowd, you had to deal with the rural crowd, you had to deal with Rockbridge was a semi-bedroom community of a larger area of Roanoke, Virginia. So I got a real good taste of law enforcement there. I was stationed up there 20 years. My mom got diagnosed with Parkinson's and dementia at the same time, and I had to get a hardship transfer and came back down to Southwest Virginia, and that's where I retired in December 2016. So span of 40 years in law enforcement. During that time, I got interested in the instructing part of it. I was one of the early people in Virginia that were certified by general instructors by the Department of Criminal Justice Systems, which is the regulatory agency on law enforcement and also on the private security side. So for the last 38 years in in law enforcement, and then the last 4 years I've been a firearms instructor, general instructor with multiple courses and techniques. So with that, that's where I'm at today, here in Southwest Virginia.
Now, during your time with the Virginia State Police, Alan, were you patrol the entire time, or what assignments did you do?
I was patrol the entire time. I started out as a trooper, and they had a promotion program that you went from trooper 1 to trooper 2 to senior trooper and master trooper. I retired as a master trooper. I was on the road the entire time, except for the times that I was called on a lot to do a lot of instructing at the academy and in our new facilities in Blackstone, Virginia. They're adjacent to Fort Pickett. So I I was on the road other than the times that I was instructing.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. I can't imagine that length of time on patrol. Please hit that share button real quick. Share it into a group that you're a member of. Share it to someone that needs this content. Share it on your page. Share it. I want to make sure that everybody gets this information today. We got a great show coming up for you. Dana is on. Good morning, Dana. Rasmus says, thank you for your service. Donald says, hi, Alan. My wife's grandfather retired as a Virginia State Police major in the late 90s. Larry Mitchell. Ever work with him?
Know of the name. Yes, we have. When we're at full capacity, we have anywhere from 12 to 1,300 sworn positions. You won't know everybody, but certain names come across, and that name definitely is familiar. So
Good. And someone asks, Gerald asks, and I think these are a great question that came out. Law enforcement officer had on the show, last week with Brett Parker. Best and worst day, and I know that's not on the outline, Alan, but if you could share with us that would be pretty interesting.
well, the good day is when you always, and I looked at it like this, and there's so many good instances through my career. It's hard to pin down one, but the good day was every day that I could come home at the end of the shift. I have been in some pretty tight situations. I've been in a cruiser that's been hit along the interstate from a motorist in bad weather. I just looked at it like the greatest day that you had was every day that you came in and you were able to survive and go home. That's on that end of it. I bet I did have a lot of great days helping people. One time I did help a child through a very bad epileptic episode and got his airway open, kept it open until he came out of the grand mal seizure, and the family was just panicked, and we were able to get him to the hospital, and he was okay. I had a lot of instances like that. I guess the worst day that I had on the job was I was working on July 4th holiday several years ago, and it started raining, and I was sitting in a crossover in the lower end of Rockbridge County, adjacent to Botetourt County. And to give people an idea where that area is in Virginia, we are north of Roanoke, south of Stanton, Virginia. So Botetourt separates us from Roanoke. Um, it was raining very heavily. All of a sudden, the radio started blowing up about a serious crash there at the exit just inside Botetourt. Well, I was on the lower end, and I headed that way because my area office covers both of those counties. I arrived on the scene. A tractor trailer had been driving northbound on 81 through a curve. A little Honda sedan with 6 people in it, 2 adults and 4 children, was going southbound in the curve. They hydroplaned, went sideways through the median, and the tractor trailer hit the vehicle at full speed, broadsided in the driver's door. The impact tore the vehicle in half. The part of the vehicle went down over the embankment with the tractor trailer. The tractor trailer went through 2 bridges and ended up on Route 11. And when it hit Route 11, it started climbing the other embankment. When I got there, the tractor trailer driver had been thrown out. He was laying in the middle of Interstate 8 or in Route 11, and he was going through, I hate to put it in this terms, his death throes. He had a severe head injury. I knew right there was nothing happen that I could do for him at that time because I knew I had everybody kept saying, "Trooper, come up here, Trooper, come up here." I was having to go up the embankment to the interstate to get to him. The fortunate thing about this was little town of Buchanan was having their 4th of July carnival parade, and every little rescue squad and fire department in the immediate area was there. I had a tremendous response of EMS personnel and fire department there. So I immediately turned over the tractor trailer driver to the EMS. I started climbing the embankment, and that's where I counted 4 children under the age of 7 in various states of injury and dead. Got to the top, one of the kids was actually wrapped around the guardrail post. Continued on. I knew that I checked for vitals, no vitals, and due to their traumatic injuries, there's nothing could be done. The adult male, he was deceased. The adult female was laying in the middle of the northbound lanes of interstate, and she had a couple limbs dismembered. I'm not trying to be graphic, but what happened that day was, with the kids, when you have kids involved, it's tough. I don't care how people do it, it's tough. Since I was stationed in Rockbridge County, by the time the rest of the troopers in the area and supervision got there, identities of all the people involved, they were from Rockbridge County. And I had to go make the death notifications for each of them. And that was tough. I'm not going to say I've had to give death notifications numerous times, unfortunately, in my career, but having to deal with 4 small children, there was a total of 7 people killed in that crash. I know some of the other troopers in their career had to deal with the Virginia, Texas, incident down there with the mass shooting, the active shooter there. But as on an individual basis, that was the worst day of my life that I had to do that.
No, I can't imagine. Thank God I never had to work anything that awful. And but I remember we had an incident when I was a police officer. It happened years before I got hired, but the scars that it put on people. It was a pickup truck in East Tennessee. Back when I grew up, you'd put the kids in the bed of the pickup and go to town, and the truck flipped over and the scattered kids all over the place, and it was. I mean, they still talked about it, and people that were there and worked that were traumatized for life after what they saw. So thank you for your service on that awful day. Um, Before we get into the rest of the show today, Alan, and thank you for sharing that. Hmm. Ted is on. Johnny is on. Donald is on. Says death of a child is difficult for sure. Yeah. Gerald says, man, sorry and thanks for your service. Please like and
I think I've lost you, Rich.
show another department signs my paycheck. And that was my good friend Andrew Keith, my training partner here in Tennessee. I would ask you, Alan, do you agree with his sentiment?
I lost part of what that. I think I'm looking at the questions you sent me that he worked for the Constitution and the department paid his, wrote his check.
Yeah.
On the Constitution, I guess in a way that I kind of agree that you work for the Constitution, but our main job that I feel like that law enforcement is to support and defend our constitutions.
Mm.
The U.S. Constitution, with the first 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights, are the guidelines of what the citizens of the United States have as rights. It's our job to guarantee those rights are still viable out here. Freedom of speech, freedom of peaceful assembly. And we got to draw a line there somewhere, but peaceful assembly. I have no problem if somebody standing along the road, irregardless of what organization you're from. If you do it peacefully, you're showing your voice. That is our right by the First Amendment. Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, and I am very vocal about that. I feel like that we as citizens have a right. What that statement is that even the First Amendment, we have to grieve. We have a right to grieve things against the U.S. government. Well, if we don't have the Second Amendment, we can't hold on to the rest of the amendments. The right of improper and illegal searches and seizures. The right of not being a witness against yourself. All these things in the first 10 amendments, we are there to support and defend them. And I know if you break it down and if you dissect it about between Supreme Court uh, rulings and other court rulings, they've gotten lenient on some things, and now we're going 180 degrees. They're starting to say we can't do these other searches, we can't do all this other stuff. We have to go by a guideline what the actual Constitution says and what the Bill of Rights say. So I say that we are there. Yeah, we kind of work under the Constitution, but we are there to support and defend it. As far as the department writes my check, well, you got to look where that money comes from. The money comes from tax revenues, plain and simple. I don't care if you're from a state organization or a federal organization, state organization, local police, sheriff's office. That money is generated through tax revenue. And who pays the taxes out here? All of us. So we basically work for the citizens of the country. We're there to enforce the laws, to serve and protect. And, we have to be, most of the time, most law enforcement agencies are defensive. We go in after something's happened, but we also have got to be pro law enforcement and go after crimes, go after the drug dealers, go after all these situations with domestic violence, all these things that we look at here. We have to serve and protect those taxpayers. And I know we're getting ready to get into a lot of talk about everything going on with the Black Lives Matter and Tiva and all this stuff. but we still, our Constitution is the basis of what this country is run on, what our rights are, and we as law enforcement have to protect those rights.
I completely agree with you. Absolutely. I don't think that people realize, my son and I were talking about this last night. I don't think that the average American citizen realizes just how fragile our little constitutional democracy or republic is. And I think there's some bizarre idea that these things, when a country collapses around the world, it's like, well, that's a problem that's just unique to them, and it can never happen here. It absolutely can happen here. There's nothing special, inherently special in our country, except for people that defend the Constitution and recognize the fragility of what we've created here. Uh, with that being said, though, Alan, I would ask real quick, unless you have a follow-on comment on that,
Yeah, let me go to that just for one real quickly there.
please.
If you look past in history of empires and countries and, you know, expansion of empires, the Roman Empire had expansive land masses all the way up into southern Britain, Ireland, those areas. Even northern Africa, we hear, Cleopatra and all that. We look through that history. But when things started turning, they their morals went down. They weren't going with what their type of government control was. You start having greed in government. You start having, you know, assassinations in the government. You start going through all these other things, and the Roman Empire, if I'm wrong, lasted 1,000 years, give or take a few. One of the most powerful empires in the world. When they started going downhill, and show you how fragile it is, look how fast the Roman Empire ended. You look at other countries around the world. Just to give you an example of how we need to look and see how our country actually is. Uh, when the big gun sanctuary movement was sweeping through Virginia, when we got winds of all the situations with the new gun laws coming up in the legislature and all that in Virginia. We'll get into that in a little bit. I went to the one for Washington County, Virginia, and the chairman of the board of the supervisors there was very pro Second Amendment, but he gave a little speech after they made the vote to call Washington County a sanctuary county. His name is Saul Hernandez. He is originally from Venezuela, his home country. And he says, you look at the turn of Venezuela, what, 10, 15 years ago, they were probably as good an economy as the United States for the size of their country. In 10 years, they have no food, they have no rights, all the guns have been taken away, socialism, dictatorship, right there in 10 years. And if we don't turn the page in this country, and if we don't start backing law enforcement, start backing things that we have to defend and preserve the Constitution, both in Virginia and both in my state, all states have a Constitution as far as I know. We've got to protect those. If we don't do that now, we're going to be on the downhill path just like that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely agree with that. John says, hi from Oklahoma, coin number 1919. And again, if you're wondering what a coin number is, check out AmericanWarriorSociety.com to find out more. Tiny says, morning all, little late this morning. We're glad to have you, sir. Bruce says, good morning, gentlemen. James Earl White says, sorry, I'm late. He's from West Virginia. Good morning, James. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's a great segue probably to talk about the next thing. And that is because you've mentioned law enforcement quite a few times. What is the purpose of law enforcement, Alan?
Well, just like I said, the purpose of law enforcement is to protect and serve. You've seen that on a lot of cruisers out here, but we're to protect and serve. We don't protect individuals as a whole, but we protect communities as a whole. We protect and serve. Law enforcement is enforce the laws that are on the books, and the books are there for public safety, highway safety. They're there for constitutional purposes. The laws are there to have public order. Uh, there are laws on there to help keep public order, and then if you don't, then you have to take drastic measures to do that. But law enforcement is there to provide society. And I know we'll get a lot of criticism for what I'm about to say on this, but we're to give all persons, all people, a safe place to live, to protect. And that's what the law enforcement is geared for. And throughout time, law enforcement has had to adapt to changing social situations. Uh, I grew up in the, late 60s, early 70s. That was the free spirit, free love, free drugs, all that stuff. We survived that because we put concentrated effort on certain things as far as enforcement. We've gone through prosperity. We've gone through um, budget cuts. We've all survived all that. But now, right now, in this day and time, law enforcement is a crossroads. I don't know which way it's going to go exactly at this point in time. It's going to depend on elections. It's going to depend on government ideals. I just don't know. And I don't know what law enforcement's job is going to look like and what they're going to be doing in the next 5 or 6 years, even at this point in time. But law enforcement is out there to serve and protect and enforce the laws. That's their job.
Yeah, it is their job, and that's a great point. Iowa is checking in. Gene is on. Good morning, Gene. Thank you to the folks that are watching us live, and thank you to everyone that will watch us in the replay. If you are just joining us, I'm speaking today with Alan Kelly, more than 30 years as a Virginia State police officer, all that time in patrol, and before that, he was in other capacity of law enforcement. And we're talking about the state of law enforcement today. And one of the questions I had for you is this current state of unrest that we seem to be going through and have been going through for a number of months now, Alan, what does it have to teach us about where we're at with, I guess I'm trying to get at racial injustice and equality, if anything? Can we learn anything about what's going on today about that?
Well, if we don't, we're in big trouble. If we don't learn something from it. I hate to say this, 8 minutes and 56 seconds changed law enforcement quicker than anything I've seen in my career and retirement. Whether what was going on during that we still haven't gotten the final verdict of the Minneapolis situation. That 8 minutes and 56 seconds even changed how I'm having to teach certain things in the private security side. So,
What was your initial response when you saw that video of George
well, when
Floyd?
I saw it, I was in a way shocked because my training is and has always been you only use what force is necessary to counteract the opposite force. And once that force has been either neutralized or stabilized or restrained, you do nothing else. Okay. This gentleman was handcuffed. He might have been thrashing around. He might have been doing it. We got bits and snippets there in the beginning. When I first saw that, I just said, "Oh no, here we go again." Uh, then I got to finding out certain things. Then we got to finding out toxicology results. So I don't think the whole story is going to come out until we hit a trial with that situation. But me personally, I've been in situations where we've had all-out brawls. Once we got the person, restrained, even they're still combative. If you've got them handcuffed, you've got them, leg restraints on. Um, what else are they going to do? Yeah, they're going to run their mouth. They're going to spit. They're going to, buck around in the cruiser. They're going to hit their head on the cage. They're going to hit their head on the window. Whatever they're, quite a type of cruiser or paddy wagon or whatever you got for your local agency. What more can they do? They are restrained at that point in time. Uh, that's, I'm trying to be careful on what I say here, Rich, but with that situation, I was shocked at first, but then as I came along, I said, well, we're going to find out more. Then I'll make my definitive mind on what I should feel about that situation. So,
Well,
can't add much more to that.
no, I think that's a mature and reasoned approach. As an investigator, in the Marine Corps, a lot of people would, even the convening authority for the court martial that would hand me my letter to scope of the investigation, and like get on a plane and go figure this out. He would start wondering, but what do you think? And now that you've been on the ground out there, you've had a chance to look at this and look at that. What do you think, Rich? And I'm like, I think it's too early to think anything. I'm gathering facts right now. And when I'm done gathering facts, then I'll start forming an opinion based on those immutable facts. So I think that's what America has to do. Let's hit the pause button, because I'm with you, Alan. When I saw that video, it shook me to my core. If you watch the entire thing, I just couldn't fathom that. And this is coming from a guy that, I've put my neck on a lot of people. I put my knee on a lot of people's necks and upper backs, both in training and in the street. But I've never seen anything quite like that. And I'm going to hit the pause button, because once, like you said, Alan, more fragments of information starts leaking out, it paints a slightly different picture than the one that I initially had. And I agree with you. Let's wait. Let's let the courts work through this. That's the only way that we're going to get justice for anybody.
And that's what we need society as a whole to do. It's not just, law enforcement but society as a whole needs to wait until all the information is there. Then if they've got grievances, go out here and protest peacefully, let your grievances be known. And if it looks like that there is a violation of law there and he's going to be found guilty, then, let that flow the way it goes. But at the same time, we as a society need to kind of hold back and wait and find out the true facts of the situation.
And I get it. It's hard to do, because in today's news cycle, we're just bombarded with this, and we think, no, I know exactly what happened. No, you don't. You weren't there. You don't know everything. Let's see. Donald says, so if politicians pass disarmament of the Second Amendment, will law enforcement officers obey politicians? That remains to be seen. I don't know. What do you think, Alan?
Well, I know if I was still working, I'm still a firm believer in the Constitution that says you have a right to bear arms. I mean, there's a comma there between the militia and the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. So we have a right to have a militia, and we have a right to to bear arms. So I would have to say that nobody knows how many guns or what I've got. You understand where I'm coming from on that?
Yeah.
And that's by the Constitution. There again, that Constitution gives us certain rights. And so I can't speak for other law enforcement officers, but I got a distinct idea that most of them, are pro-gun. You've got some people out here in law enforcement that aren't, but I can't speak for as a whole. So I don't know which way if I'm making a statement that, yeah, all of them would not go by it or whatever. I think it depends on your administration and your department. I think it depends on the community and the location where you live.
Yeah, good answer. Let's see. Gene says, thank you to all who serve. My brother Jeff is on. Good morning. Jeff has more than 20 years of maritime law enforcement with the United States Coast Guard. Thank you, Jeff, for your service as well. Tiny says, do law enforcement personnel have a duty to refuse to enforce unlawful orders, i.e. unconstitutional orders? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it has to be ruled whether it's unconstitutional or not. We feel like a lot of the laws here in Virginia have just been passed, and we'll get into that in a little bit, that are unconstitutional. They're limiting law enforcement to do their job. So I think it depends on the situation. You're going to have to get some cases in the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals to let people, if you feel like it's an unconstitutional law, then it's got to be determined that before you can back off and not enforce it. That's just the way it is. I mean, if it's a law on the books, your administration and your department may say, well, we're not going to do anything on that. Just go on about your business. And then you've got some departments, if it's on the books, it's going to be enforced. So, I think when it boils right down to it, we got to go back to the Constitution. We have to have some ruling on it to say that it is either not constitutional or constitutional law, and it'll stay on the books. So
yeah,
that's the way I have to look at that.
That's a very nuanced answer for a very complex problem. And I would tell you, I have refused a couple of orders before as a law enforcement officer that were immoral and unethical. And I'm like, hey, man, let's run this up to the chief. I'm absolutely not going to do it. And of course,
Right.
then they backed off of that because, they knew that what they were asking me to do was immoral and unethical. And it's like,
Right.
I'm not doing it. I'll suffer the consequences and we'll let that fall out where it falls out.
Well, I've been there on that end of it. When you are given an order that, you know, is not up to what policy is or not up to what, the law states. Um, yeah, I've been there on that situation too. But when it comes down to a law that is on the books, that has been codified, been
Mm-hmm.
approved, codified, and put into existence, you almost have to deal with it. I mean,
Yeah.
you could be held in malfeasance or of duty, and
Yep.
with that can get you in as much trouble as going out here and shooting an unarmed person. And I hate to say that, but it can ruin your career over that. So
Well, yeah. And come for the military folks that are on this morning, as an enlisted Marine, I was afforded all these avenues, to redress of grievance. I could request mass and ask to speak to my commanding officer, all the way up to the commandant of the Marine Corps. There's first sergeants and sergeant majors that are there to hear you and your complaints. As an officer who took an oath, you have one thing that you can do. There is no redress of grievance other than a resignation letter. So if
right.
you either execute the orders by the officers above you, or
Hmm.
you resign. So that's what your options are.
And that's we and this, you have a law enforcement officer's bill of rights. You have in the state of Virginia grievance procedure. So that's the way you address those outside of enforcing the law situations that you come down on you and say, hey, you need to do this, but I'm saying no, that's against the law to do that. No, that's going to get me in trouble because it's immoral. It's not by policy, et cetera, et cetera. So we have that right in law enforcement, but they're trying to change the laws on that to where you don't have much leeway in that anymore. So it's becoming a catch-22 situation in
Yeah.
some instances.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Mike Varley is on. Good morning. Mike up there in Virginia, coin number 1122. Diana is on, says, good morning from Charleston. Miss my home state of Virginia. She says, Joe Saunders of the Managing Violence podcast is on. Good morning, Joe. Glad to have you from Melbourne, Australia. Donald says, I'm retired military. If the communists and government continue to destroy the rule of law, I will tell them to get bent.
Yeah.
Well said. Brett is on, a retired law enforcement officer out in California. And Donald says, spot on, Rich. Okay, let's get to the next question, sir. Here in the United States this summer, I heard something new I've never heard before, and that's this defund the police idea, air quotes, defund the police. And this movement, man, is gaining steam. What does this idea mean to you, and what do you think it means to them, Alan?
Oh, I think you reap what you sow, and
Mm.
that's going to come back to bite. And it's already proven in Minneapolis. If I'm not mistaken, I read an article in a prominent newspaper that with what's been going on with them wanting to defund the police, and they have done that, and wanting to reorganize the police department, morale in the department has dropped out of the bucket. It's in the toilet right now, and it's in the toilet in a lot of agencies right now. The morale is the lowest I've seen it. Why do we even go out here and work if they're going to tie our hands like that? Well, when you defunded the police, you're taking away their abilities to do their job completely. You're either taking away positions out here where police are stretched too far as it is, then you're making one officer do the work of three or four officers. You're putting that officer in more danger because he doesn't have the availability of numerous backups, particularly in smaller agencies. You're limiting the equipment that they are able to get a hold of to do their job. They're even gone and so far, some places are shutting down the program where the federal government gives law enforcement equipment, which makes their job easier, makes it better, even makes operating the job more safer to the public. you're going to see a rise in crime, which you're seeing in these locations. In Minneapolis, the public's saying, hey, the police aren't coming to answer the calls. We can't get them to come here. Well, what do you expect? You're cutting their funds. You're making the officers work harder with less. You're putting the officers in more danger by not having additional officers for backup. You're, what do you expect? What do you expect them to do? They're not going to go out there and be proactive law enforcement due to the fact, well, if I pull this vehicle over for running that stop sign back there, and it turns out to be a person of a different race, where is this going to go to me right now? What am I going to be into? It's going to make officers hesitant because they know that they're not being backed. How would you feel if you go out here on the job and well, you've got to make a split-second decision of deadly force? Are you going to think twice about, look at the problems the rest of these officers in the country have gone through under this? You may have the most justifiable, case of deadly force in the world, but the chances are you're going to be put through the criminal justice system. So with this, with the defunding of police, you're killing morale. Your law enforcement agencies are having a terrible time getting and retaining personnel. They're leaving in masses. I've read several articles where 200 plus law enforcement officers have retired at one time. In the state police, here recently, we had over 100 go as retirement, and the human resources can't keep up with the packets they're having to, get for retirements. They're leaving for other jobs. They're just quitting, So that's going to be the problem. You defund them, you don't have their back, then you're going to have no law enforcement. Who's going to take care of the people out here? Who's going to protect them? Who are going to answer the calls? Federal law says you can't bring in the military. The National Guard can, but they're only limited on what they can do. They can't do law enforcement. They can do crowd control, do something like that. Look what happened back in the 60s and the 70s when Kent State, when they had the military out there and National Guard, what that came in. So you're looking at a situation that can go in the toilet real quick. And that's just another way when you start having this part of society go down and you defund the police, you have less police. Back in the 70s, we went through the same thing. They started cutting police agencies. Crime started going up like a banshee. Then they realized, we got to go out here, and the federal government put out more money to the local agencies and local governments to hire more police. You're going to see that circle come right back around if this trend continues.
Yeah, I think I don't disagree with anything you just said. I think that I think there could be a discussion for not defund the police, but give them more money, because as Joe Saunders points out, the craziest thing about these defund the police nuts is that they're also saying police need more training. Guess what gets sacrificed first when the budget is tight? Optional training.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I remember when I was a police officer, I took my personal vacation and my personal money and paid for training that I couldn't get at my department, that I thought was going to be necessary to keep me safe. I will tell you that I think that if I'm open to a discussion about reimagining policing, I think there could be some utility to that in regards to when police officers show up to deal with a mentally ill person who's having a moment. We are not always equipped to deal with that situation. What we arrive on the scene with is, our knowledge of the law and whatever is equipped on our belt and whatever backup may come. So maybe there's a way to get social workers or mental health professionals involved in some of those calls. I don't know, but I also community policing. I've seen personally a lot of value in having officers that were embedded with those. Like we had in a housing project, there were some officers that lived and worked in there and did a phenomenal job of handling things almost like Andy Griffin. They knew everybody, and they were able to get out in front of these problems before we in patrol had to deal with them. And then another thing, Alan, I'll throw to you because your service as a law enforcement officer it spans such an incredible length of time. Here's what I've seen in my 50 years or 51 years. First of all, it was like, okay, these police officers, they need to be better educated. We're hiring the dregs. We need to make sure they're better educated. And the law enforcement officers today are incredibly well educated. Most departments mandate a minimum of associate's degree, if not a bachelor's degree. Then they said, okay, that's great, but there's still problems. We need to know what's going on. We need cameras in the car. Not a problem.
I don't have a problem with that either.
Nope, not a problem. But there's other things going on that we're not being able to see. So we want cameras on the officers. Not a problem. We got too many shootings. Okay, we need more and less lethal. Not a problem. We'll add OC spray. We'll add tasers. We'll add expandable batons that give the officer more or less lethal options. We want officers. We think the wrong officers are still out there, so we want psych evals. Okay, most states mandate that you have a current psych eval on file. I guess the point of saying all this stuff is, as the communities have clamored for the officers to have better training, better equipment, better this, better that, add more stuff onto their job, society, in my opinion, Alan, has not done the same thing. They have not said, hey, look, it's not your right to resist arrest. You have no right to resist arrest when you're being placed under lawful arrest. Submit, and if it was a bad arrest, we'll deal with that later. But in that moment, you're only going to put yourself and the officer at risk by resisting. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to go over several things on that. You mentioned earlier in your commentary there about the defunding of police and needing to train officers more. Okay. When you defund the police, training goes out the door, just like you said. Okay. Uh, that needs to be, there needs to be more interpersonal training between society. What I'm saying there, and I'm going to expand a little bit on that. Right now, the Department of State Police, when they had openings here, even 10 years ago, if they had 100 openings, you get 3,000 applications. Now you have openings, and there's a shorthand. They're getting into the place where they need to replace personnel pretty quick. You put out that you're hiring, you may only get 100 applications. Well, by the time you go through the background checks, like you were talking about, and do all this, you've weeded it down. You're hoping you can get 40 people that are qualified enough to put through an academy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be a problem in itself. How do we get those good people out here with the way the news media and everything's coming about, putting a bad light on law enforcement? Who would want to be a law enforcement officer at this point in time? So you're in a catch-22 situation. I say that a lot, but you are. Here you need people, but you can't get them. And what you get, how are you going to really know that is the cream of the crop that you want in your law enforcement agency? Okay? That's going to be the problem to write straight up front on this. Then you went into changes. I agree. There need to be not a lot, but there need to be some critical changes in law enforcement. I have no problem with the mental health aspect there. Just to give you an example on that, I don't know how many times I've run into mental subjects out here. Once you latch on to them, some of them are to the point you just can't let them go. So you have to bring them in a protective custody order. Then you have to notify the mental health people. You have to take them to the emergency room for evaluation. And then once they get through all their rigmarole, looking at it and doing their evaluation of the patient, if they decide to get them into a facility, big problem is we need to have mental health reform to where we can have funding to have enough beds, enough places. I live in Abingdon. I used to be in Lexington, so I live in Abingdon now. I had an incident where I had to drive the subject because once you latch on to them, they're your responsibility. You just can't leave them until somebody says he's going to be committed to this location, or he's going to be, released or whatever. They committed this person, and it's not an extremely long trip, but I had to go from Abingdon to Salem, Virginia, which is a community of Roanoke, to the hospital up there, 2.5 hour transport. I have had instances when I was in Lexington, Virginia, run into a mental health subject. The only bed they had available was in Petersburg, Virginia, which is south of Richmond. That's a 3.5 hour drive, to get there, and 3.5 hour drive. You've taken the officer off the road for an entire shift or have to pay him overtime. So we need mental health reform. I have no problem with mental health personnel going into those situations, but you're going to have law enforcement officer there first to make sure it's a stable situation before you can turn them over to the mental health and you can leave and continue what you need to do regularly in the job. So there has to be some reforms, but they're going to have to look at it very carefully on the safety aspect. And they're going to have to provide funds to have facilities available to where we can treat these people and get them off the streets and start getting them headed in the right direction. Some of them are never going to be completely healed. Mental health is, if it's gone so long, can be non-reversible. So we're going to have some way to deal with those people. Where's the money going to come from? You can't defund the police all the way to get enough money to take care of the other situation. It's just not going to happen. So those are the things we look at. Training out here, less lethal. Yeah, we give the officer, he has a belt that he almost have to have a dolly to carry around all the equipment he's got now. But you got to get the officer in the mindset. He's still got to make a split second decision if that is going to be deadly force. He can't hesitate long enough because it could be deadly force against him. But you got to be able to give him the mentality and the training to be able to react quickly and be able to decide, well, this is not a deadly force situation. I need to use other less lethal means, or we need to talk to this subject for a while. That's the training we don't get totally enough of in the academies, I feel like. So there's going to have to be compromise. There's going to have to be changes, but they're also going to have to realize law enforcement cannot go away. And the other changes you were talking about need to be implemented, but where is the money going to come from? And I'm going to go into this a little bit. There's another way to defund the police, and we've all been through it, is budget cuts. Look at the situation with the budgets across the country with COVID-19. Revenues are not coming in. People are not working. They're not getting the tax revenues in. Businesses are shut down. Where are those tax revenues going to supplement all the things that the government has to provide, like police, fire, sanitation, all that? This is drying up. Virginia's got one heck of a deficit in their budget, so they're probably going to have to start cutting things. So those things, where are they going to get the money through all this? Those are the things you have to deal with. When you have a budget cut, we got to the point there in the mid-'70s when we were in law enforcement, we had to take our cruiser, shut it down, set on the long interstate, be visible, but you had to turn the car off for 10 minutes per hour just to be able to save funds. So and I hate to say this, but this all boils down to a bottom line number. What are you going to do? How are you going to implement these things, particularly in this time? And, I agree with you. Changes need to be made, but there's that catch-22 situation. What are we going to do?
Yeah, with regard to money, it's a great point. I remember the lean years in the military where we couldn't afford to do anything, couldn't shoot live ammunition, couldn't get blanks. I mean, like, what are we doing here, guys? I mean, should we just go home? Donald says, I believe we should defund idiot politicians. That's funny. Rudy says, I think that's a great point about the cycle of defunding, rising crime, panic, and trying to get the problem under control. It's the age-old pendulum problem. Joe Saunders says, Jocko Willick has an excellent point that we need to start giving kids in school training on how to interact with the police. Absolutely agree with that.
I agree with that.
Absolutely. Mandatory training in high school about what to do if you're pulled over, if you're questioned, if you think you're being treated unfairly, etc. Let them know their rights, but also what is likely to happen if they escalate or act up in the moment rather than playing their part and sorting it out later. Yeah, absolutely. Talked about this before. I was a police officer. I had law enforcement officers point loaded guns in my face twice. Once I was in uniform as a Marine right outside of a Marine Corps base. I mean, it's obvious I'm a clean cut kid. I'm in my Marine Corps uniform, and I stepped one place where I shouldn't have, and at a not out of malice, but out of, I couldn't hear what the officer was saying, and he drew down on me, and I'm like, wow. And you know what I did? I got an attorney, and I took it that way. So there's an avenue for this. And another thing, Alan, I don't know if you watched the debate last night, but this idea of Black and brown parents have to give their children the talk, as to how to interact with law enforcement and in order to stay alive, or whatever the commentator's point was. I've given my children the talk. And guess what? If you're watching this morning, you need to be giving your children the talk on how to deport themselves in the presence of law enforcement officers, not just to stay alive, but just to be a good citizen. What do you think about that?
I think it needs to be done. I mean, you've got to realize that we've got a job to do out there. And when that vehicle, if you pull somebody over, the best thing you can do is comply. If you just comply and then you've got a grievance later on, take it just to steps that what you were talking about and what I talked about earlier. If you got a complaint, make that complaint. But at the same time, don't do something stupid. Get your kids out of here. Let them know. Hands on the steering wheel. Don't make furtive movements. I know you're going to be nervous. I know you're going to be scared. Still to this day, I'm retired. If I've got my speed up a little bit and I pop a radar, I'm thinking, I get a little anxious, So it's natural human reaction to being pulled over by the police.
Yeah. And
I
I was going to say, go ahead.
I was just going to say, talk to the kids. Tell them just to be, respectful. Don't talk back to the officer. If you feel like you've been done, have been given a raw deal, go home, talk to mom and dad. Let mom and dad help you take that to the correct line of reasoning. Either through a complaint or whatever. But talk to them. Tell them what to do. I agree with that 100%. I think that should be, because with this day and time, the way society is, even right before I retired in 2016, when I pull a vehicle over that far back, they were shoving a camera in my face right that point in time. Well, that didn't bother me because I wasn't doing anything other than what I was supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
But that was the way people were starting to react even before I retired. So definitely have that talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Gilly says, hello, Rich. Hello, Alan. Hello, everybody. Gilly's over there in the Philippines. Gilly, thank you for being on this morning. Donald says, great interview today. Donald Rutledge says, my parents taught me to respect law enforcement, especially my family members who were in law enforcement. Ted says, in commercial nuclear power, we would say the training you see today in mock-ups and on simulators is your organization in 3 years. Recovering from weak training is very time-consuming and costly. And that, we've had Dr. Fuller on the show. TC Fuller is a retired FBI agent. And he said, you get the law enforcement agency that you pay for. So to your point about, where things were in the 70s and where things are headed now, this pendulum effect that Rudy mentioned earlier is exactly what we're seeing. And you're going to get the law enforcement agency that you pay for. If you don't spend the money, guess what you're going to get?
That's exactly right. I mean, it's boiled down to a lot of law enforcement agencies, and this is a problem on what's going on with no tax revenue and things that's going on in the society. They've had to shut down part of their firearms training, going from twice a year to once a year. They can only shoot so many rounds because ammunition is not available now. One of the entities that I teach or instruct firearms to, they're having to do the same thing. We're getting ready to do their fall qualifying, and we used to do daylight and nighttime, but they only have enough ammunition to do one round of qualification instead of two. These things right here, just like you and him, our guest had out here, if you don't have the money, you can't train. If you don't have the supplies, you can't train. So you're relying on what they already know. When there may be changes that have to be made, you can't train. So which direction do you go on? You just stay status quo and let it go, and then just hope for the best out here. I mean, that's something's reality, and it's hitting home right now with law enforcement training.
Yeah, and Andrew Yang, who was a Democratic presidential candidate one of the things that he said was if he was president, he would mandate that all police officers become a minimum of purple belt in jujitsu. Well, that's requires 4 to 6 years minimum of training, maybe more.
Right.
And who's going to pay for that? And oh, by the way, one of the problems I have with these kind of things is, again, um, I should not have to put my safety and security in risk in order for you to peacefully and safely resist arrest. Again, I think we need to train citizens on how to interact with the police officers, because and if Black Lives Matter truly cared about Black lives, they would teach. It would be, you could go on their website and find videos of how to interact with law enforcement, but of course that's not on their website.
Nope, not at all.
Okay, Alan, thank you for coming on today, and thank you for everybody that's joining us today in this really cool discussion, and thank you for everybody that's going to be watching in the replay. I want to ask you, Alan, and I want to get to this question that Joe asked before I get to some of my questions. It says, what advice would you give to a rookie about to enter the job in this unique time in history?
Listen to some of your older officers. They've been around, they're seasoned, they know they have to make changes, long. That's I was a FTO in the state police. You've got to be able to listen to them. You've got to know, they've got the experience to know when you need to break bad and when you don't. Just put it bluntly like that. They can, if you listen to how they interact and listen to all the older, if you listen to a lot of the older ones, they go up with it's not a lackadaisical attitude, but it's more, hey, what's going on here? How can I help you? They don't go in screaming. They don't get all hyped up. Um, that's one of the things I would tell them. Another thing, take as much outside training as you can get and you can afford. I did the same thing that you did. I went through extra firearms courses. I went through extra uh, classes for crash investigation on my own. The department, I was a level 3 crash investigator, but I went to other things on my own. I went to other training on my own. Take as much of that as you can afford, because there again, it boils down to what the budget is for your department and how much they're able to train to give you, how your academies are set up. Your larger law enforcement agencies have their own academy. The smaller agencies have to go through a regional academy, so they're going in a little bit different situation there.
Yeah.
Make sure that's the career you want to get into. That's number one. If you're a rookie officer and you go out here and, you know, don't try to tough it out if it's not for you. I've seen too many times where that's the officer who will cause you problems out here. So if it's not for you, get out of it. That's just plain and simple. If you got the heart for it, put your heart into it, treat people fairly out here. Uh, we're not supposed to be the bad guy in this situation. So treat people fairly out here. You know, you got to do what you got to do. Sometimes you got to arrest them. Don't apologize for doing your job, but do it professionally and be a gentleman, or be a person out here, that they will later on may respect you and come to you because of the way you treated them. You know, that doesn't mean that not going to be out. You're going to have to go down and get dirty with somebody. You're going to have to take them down. You're going to have to do your job. But most of the time, if you handle the situation, try to be calm and cool at a even tone voice, go out here, you can get most of the situations under control by doing that. If you go in there like like the one on Red October where they say they're going to be like a buckaroo, if you go in like a buckaroo, you're not going to get anywhere. That's just plain and simple. So I would just give them that type of advice, uh, and tell them to go follow some of the older officers out there that have been there. A lot of people say, well, that old officer's an old grumpy curmudgeon, but that old grumpy curmudgeon will probably save your life out here one day. You understand where I'm coming from? So
I do.
that's exactly what I would tell them.
Well said. Tiny says, what do you think is the political end game of the defunding of law enforcement? Is there an end game? And if so, what do you think it is, Alan?
Well, there again, we're getting political a little bit. Look at the whole situation of everything in the leftist dream out here. Less authoritarian people, uh, free stuff all the time. If you don't have law enforcement officers here, it's almost like in the 70s, free love, the whole thing, there is a political agenda to it. I don't want to get into that real deeply because, that's a lot of controversy there, but there is a political agenda. They're trying to appease too many people with things that aren't going to go good in the long term if they do that. If you look, the bulk of the people out here in the country want law and order. So if you've got the bulk of the people that want law and order, and the rest of them, that political agenda is to get the other people to change their mind, and that's the way I look at it.
Yeah. Diana says, I got to stop listening and go teach middle school math. Diana, good luck with that today. Thank you for what you're doing. Johnny says, it has been my 74 years of experience. When you treat law enforcement with respect, they treat you with respect. Yes, sir. And no, sir, goes a long way. I agree with that, sir. 100%. Let me ask you this, Alan, where is all this lawlessness going?
Oh, that's what scares me right now more than anything else. Until we get a handle on that, some way to get a handle on that, it's going to continue and it's going to fester until we get our local governments, state governments, and the federal governments. And this is going, and I hate to say this is going to determine what the election outcome is. Until we get those people to start backing law enforcement, to where we can get this lawlessness under control. The Constitution gives us the right to peaceful assembly. It does not give us the right to go out here, riot, destroy, burn. Don't tell your law enforcement to back down and abandon your precinct, to let it get burned down. Give your law enforcement, tell them, take it under control. Then let's work with these communities, get in these communities, do the community police and talk to these people, see what needs to be done. But we can't let this lawlessness and this destruction continue on. If you do, it's going to get too far, and you're not going to have enough law enforcement officers in the country to be able to handle it. So, and these, as Barney would say it, or Andy would say, it needs to get nipped in the bud right now. And we need to go out here and enforce laws. This is the thing about the change of laws in Virginia, where they took down and they've decimated all the monuments. The governor just signed a law for people that have been charged with that. In 8 years, they get their record expunged for damaging monuments, vandalism, and criminal acts like that. So if you get charged, why? If you keep your nose clean for 8 years, it's going to be expunged. So there's one of those laws that, is going to let it go too far. I mean, you've got consequences to your actions. So we've got to come through and we got to back our law enforcement officers, and we got to have decent laws. If you tear something up, there's a racket, What if these politicians, somebody come up and say, well, I can go out here and do a monument, but you're not doing what I want you, and go out there and vandalize and destroy their car. What's the first thing they're going to do? Call police and want them to take care of the damage. Well, the monuments are of the people, not of the, so go out here and expunge your record because they don't want that, and because they did what they thought was a protest and damaging things. Those things have got to change. And, I'm probably going to get a lot of heat of saying that, but those things have got to change, because if we don't get ahead of this, that's just going to give people the idea, well, I can just go up here and tear up Jack. All I'm going to get is a misdemeanor charge, and it's going to be expunged after a few years. So we've got to get control of it. If we don't, we're not going to be able to get, after a period of time, if it doesn't, we don't get control and it doesn't get, stopped, we're going to be in a lot more heartache later on.
No, I agree with you. Got for you, Alan. Thank you for coming on the show. We've been on for over an hour now. And, Gerald says chaos could take over. I think he's responding to some of the things that you said, and he's right. One of the questions I have for you is specific to Virginia, where you're at, Alan. What's going on with the infringement of the Second Amendment? How did it happen, and what's the status there?
Well, number one, two things, and I hate. I'm gonna just say, like I said before, and we talked in our pre-thing. If you don't want to know, don't ask me. But it boils down two things: the Republican Party let us down in the state of Virginia. We had 23 House of Delegates seats in the state of Virginia that were unopposed. Unopposed. That's ridiculous. Get somebody to run against these people. Even if they lose, at least these people are going to show I need to listen. I need to know what's going on. The legislatures are in the office. So the Republican Party let us down on that. And that was just in the House of Delegates. There were some Senate seats that were not were unopposed on. So we got elected Governor Northam, which he has turned out to be the most leftist person that we've ever had as a governor. We the people let ourselves down. Get up off your tail and go vote. Number one. The way they've got it now, you can almost vote from the house. Get an absentee ballot, fill it out, mail it back in. You don't even have to leave the house anymore. But go vote. And I have some feelings about all this pre-voting and all like that. I still think election day should be election day unless you got a full good excuse to get absentee ballot. But that's just me personally. But we the people let ourselves down. The Republican Party let us down. After we saw what was happening, that's when the wave of sanctuary cities and counties came about, and we had the big peaceful cooperative demonstration, protest, or whatever you want to call it, there in Richmond. And they put emergency laws on the book because they thought it was going to be, dramatic firearms, shootouts, etc. The guys even brought trash bags and picked up the trash after the protest was over. And it was cleaner than the moms against, me and mom stuff and the moms against guns or whatever you call all those organizations. We showed that we were respectful, law abiding, good people out here to the public. It wasn't anything. They were open carrying in the areas where they could be. There was not a shot fired. All those people with guns around there, the people inside the chain link fence could not be armed, but they got in there and voiced their opinions. Well, they were already in the charge of the legislature, both houses of the legislature and the governor's seat. What did it do? Not a whole lot, but we put enough pressure on that they delayed the so-called ban on assault rifles, the modern sporting rifles. I guarantee it's going to come back up in January when the next session of the legislature goes on. And they've got another bill for the high-capacity magazines. That's probably going to come back. The guy that put that out is a rabid anti-gun delegate. So we're going to have to get our Virginia Citizens Defense League going again to be able to hopefully counteract that. But those are the things. We let ourselves down. The Republican Party let us down, and they are trying to do everything they can to abolish our gun rights. They've even put a law out here that allows individual governments to enact piecemeal gun control. Say Abingdon, Virginia has a festival downtown. Even if you have a concealed carry, if they mark off a certain area, even temporarily, it says no gun zone, they're allowed to do that by law. And, and several of your larger metropolitan areas have done that in parks and different places, government buildings. So even with a concealed carry permit, if you don't have a map saying, well, this place doesn't have, gun control, or this one does, or, I can't carry guns here, you could accidentally get yourself in trouble in a heartbeat. So we're really looking at a hard road to hoe. And if hopefully this next election in 2021, the governor goes and we get control of both the House and Senate, if people will just get off their tail and vote. They're saying Northern Virginia, Richmond, and Tidewater control everything, but they divided the state up in kind of districts. They said if everybody else in the rest of the state, because we only got a 25 or 30% turnout votes in the rural areas, they said if everybody in the rest of the state would come out and vote, we could outpower those 3 metropolitan areas. So we got to get active. We got to do what we've got to do to get involved with that part of it. And if we don't, Virginia's going to hurt. You know, even my wife and I have secretly talked about, and now it's out and open, that if it gets so bad that we live right here near Tennessee line, we may even look for a place in Tennessee to live. So,
Well, yeah, well, I think that's a great point, and I think that there's a lesson for states like Tennessee that sees, here in Tennessee, we're watching what's going on in Virginia and going, and I can't believe it. I never thought I would see the day when Virginia, in one election cycle, just one, not a slow slide, but in one election cycle, could go this far left. It is amazing to me, and it just shows exactly what you said, Alan. You got to get there and vote. You cannot take any of this for granted. You got to get involved, and you got to stay involved. A couple things here before we close it out. PJ Tahoe is on. Good morning, PJ from Tahoe. Donald says, VCDL is an amazing organization that I'm glad to be a part of. Done way more for Virginia gun rights than the NRA. Tony says bought and paid for by George Soros. Yeah. And I don't know why people aren't talking more about that. What is George Soros's end game is what I want to know. What is he buying with all this money that he's spending?
He wants a socialistic government, period, nationwide. That's it. That's his outcome. So that's what he's for. And if you look at most of the people that he's backed with tremendous amount of money, that's where they're leaning right now. So if you look at the trail of money, go back to what the one gentleman said about the VCDL, the Virginia Citizens Defense League. If they were a nationwide gun advocate group, there would be nobody that could beat them. To see what they did, the turnout, the feet on the ground type situations, they outran the NRA 140, 150%. There was no contest. The NRA hardly opened their mouth during this whole thing, during our situation back in the late winter, early spring. So the Citizens Defense League is number one. I wish they would have the clout throughout the country that they and the backbone and the feet on the ground or grassroots organization that they had. If they did that nationwide, we wouldn't have to worry about it. I mean, maybe people may think I'm exaggerating, but to see what they did and what their heart and their soul that went into this thing, it was amazing.
Yeah, Walt says follow the money. We've had on here Neil Taylor, who's a corporate attorney in South Africa, explaining gun laws over there. And one of the things that he talked about is the amount of money that George Soros was putting into South Africa to dismantle what little gun rights they still have remaining. And again, it's not just here. People that have that kind of wealth are able to influence politics globally, and he is certainly doing it. Alan, anything else before we get off this morning? We've got 29 folks still with us this morning, and a lot of people are going to watch in the replay. Any final thoughts, sir?
Well, appreciate you having me on for one thing. I think everybody out here needs to take a pause and breathe and look and see what direction this country is and talk to family and friends. Go out here and vote. This is not just for Virginia, but for everybody right now. We are the crossroads in this nation. And in my heart, I bleed the blue and red, white, and blue. I bleed the blue and gray on law enforcement because that was our colors in the state police. Don't think about defunding. Think about talking and some changes that need to be made, the positive changes toward law enforcement. Talk to your local officers out here. Get the feeling what they're thinking about, what's going on with them. If the citizens reach out a little bit too, not only the police reach out to these, the citizens. If the citizens will reach out to police and start talking and start, interacting, I think that's going to help a long ways in trying to heal some of these wounds. And it's not just the, whites, the brown, blacks, the Asians, it's everybody. Look at us. You cut us, we bleed. We go home and we cry. You know, there's been instances that I've gone out here that, I've gone home and, you know, you try to close the door on the cruiser, but you can't with what you've seen. You just got to learn to, and these officers are human. They may be rough, gruff around the edges, and sometimes the job makes them rough and gruff around the edges. But they've got most of them. 99% of law enforcement officers have got a heart, soul, and a conscience. And go out here and interact with them. They're not the bad man. Don't tell your kids when a police officer comes around that he's going to go take you to jail. That kid might need somebody to help them in a situation one time, and you may be the one in the uniform that they need to go to. Don't make it hesitant for them to go to that law enforcement officer. Like I said, we're human. We've got our ups and downs. We have our bad days just like everybody else. Sometimes it's hard to, separate the two, but we're just human. Treat us as such, and we will be there for you too. So that's basically it, Rich.
Well, thank you, Alan. Well said. Donald says, thanks, Rich and Alan. Coin number 1376 from New Kent, Virginia. Johnny Petrie says, Mr. Kelly has tremendous amount of wisdom. I've enjoyed listening to him, and so have I, Johnny. And listen, everybody that joined us today on this discussion, please thank you so much for being a part of the discussion today. Thank you so much to Alan for your years of honorable and faithful service to your community. And to everybody out there, remember, the fight is coming. Be ready.